Welcome to True Crime Cases. Today, we're diving into a case that shook the quiet community of Metery, Louisiana, a suburb known for its family-friendly and peaceful atmosphere. But on August 12, 2021, this place became the scene of a horrific crime that unveiled a dark secret. This is the story of Brandon Thibaut, a young man whose promising future was cut short by a dangerous obsession and a senseless act of violence. Brandon Thibaut was a charismatic and hard-working 18-year-old who lived with his grandmother, Mabel, in a modest house in the quiet suburb of Metery, west of New Orleans. Brandon was passionate about cars, a young man who spent hours fixing engines and dreamed of opening his own mechanic shop. In his senior year at East Jefferson High School, Brandon was already known not only for his mechanical skills, but also for his kind and generous nature. Mabel, his blind grandmother, relied entirely on him for her daily care. Although this responsibility could be overwhelming for someone so young, Brandon took it on with admirable maturity, balancing work, school, and time for his friends. Neighbors described him as a generous soul, always willing to help those in need. Personally, Brandon also seemed to have a stable life. He had been dating Polette Gerard for 2 years, an 18-year-old described as intelligent, ambitious, and caring. They both dreamed of a future together, talked about getting married, and building a life together after Lee finished college. However, what seemed like a perfect relationship hid a dark secret that would soon shatter all those illusions. Unbeknownst to anyone, Brandon was having a secret affair with Polette Gerard, Lee's mother. Polette, a 43-year-old woman, was a well-known figure in the community for her impeccable appearance and her multi-level marketing business called Beauty Vice, a company that, on the surface, helped women achieve financial independence by selling cosmetic products. But behind that successful facade, Polette hid an obsessive and jealous personality. Polette and Brandon began their affair in circumstances that were never fully clarified. What is known is that this relationship was not just a fling. Polette was obsessed with Brandon, to the point of making him the center of her life. Her obsession became a dangerous spiral that would lead her to commit an unimaginable act. On August 12, 2021, everything changed. The morning began like any other in Metery, with the sweltering heat of the southern summer. Mabel, as usual, expected to hear Brandon moving around the house to start his daily routine, but that day she heard nothing. Worried, she called her neighbor, Alice Dupre, a retired nurse who lived nearby. Alice ran to the house to see what was going on, but upon entering, she was met with an eerie silence and a strange metallic smell in the air. When Alice opened the door to Brandon's room, she was met with a gruesome scene. Brandon's lifeless body lay on the floor, surrounded by a pool of blood. He had been stabbed repeatedly, and his eyes were almost gouged out. A bloody knife lay beside him, evidence of the horror that had taken place. Alice, in shock, could barely dial 911 as she trembled with fear. The call quickly mobilized the Jefferson Parish Sheriff's Office, and detectives Michael Duval and Renee Martinez arrived at the scene to lead the investigation. Both were veterans with years of experience, but the brutality of the crime left them disturbed. The crime scene was heartbreaking. Blood splattered the walls, and Brandon's wounds suggested an attack fueled by rage and hatred. From the beginning, the detectives knew this was no random killing. Everything indicated that the crime was personal, likely an act motivated by intense emotions, such as jealousy or betrayal. The detectives began to reconstruct Brandon's last day, searching for clues that would lead them to the person responsible for such a violent act. The first suspicions arose quickly when detectives began investigating Brandon's relationships. Talking to his friends and acquaintances, they discovered the darkest secret: the relationship between Brandon and Polette Gerard. At first, it seemed unbelievable that his girlfriend's mother could be involved in such a heinous crime. But as the detectives dug deeper, disturbing details began to emerge. In Polette's office, detectives found evidence directly linking her to Brandon. There were explicit photographs of him, obsessive letters, and a makeshift shrine dedicated to the young man. They also found documents exposing the dark workings of Beauty Vice, a multi-level marketing scheme that had financially ruined many women in the community. Meanwhile, Polette Gerard was also questioned. The young woman was visibly shaken, devastated by the loss of her boyfriend and shattered by her mother's betrayal. Detectives discovered that Lee had found compromising text messages between Brandon and Polette days before the murder, which had sparked a heated family argument. Although Lee denied any involvement in the crime, her alibi was weak, making her another suspect in the case. On August 21, 2021, after gathering enough evidence, detectives arrested Polette Gerard at her luxurious home. Polette's reaction was a mix of disbelief and defiance, but the evidence against her was overwhelming. During her interrogation, she tried to deny any involvement in the murder, but eventually admitted to having an affair with Brandon. However, she insisted on her innocence regarding the crime. As the case progressed, the Metery community was divided between astonishment and horror. Neighbors who had once admired Polette now looked at her with contempt, while Brandon's family sought justice for the young man whose life was taken so brutally. Polette Gerard's arrest marked a turning point in the investigation, but the case was far from over. With the Metery community shaken and local media reporting every detail, Polette's trial became one of the most anticipated of the year in Louisiana. The prosecution prepared to present a solid case that would leave no doubt about her guilt, while the defense sought to sow uncertainty about the evidence and the motivations of those involved. The trial began on November 8, 2021, at the Jefferson Parish Courthouse, a courtroom packed with journalists, neighbors, and Brandon's family. Leading the case was Assistant District Attorney Mark Tremblay, a lawyer known for his precision and thoroughness. Tremblay opened his presentation by laying out the motive behind the murder: Polette Gerard's jealousy and obsession with Brandon. The prosecution showed how the illicit relationship had escalated to a breaking point, and when Brandon tried to end the affair, Polette lost control. The evidence against Polette was overwhelming. Detectives presented the objects found in her office: the explicit photographs of Brandon, the obsessive letters, and the shrine dedicated to him. In addition, text messages exchanged between Polette and Brandon, found on the victim's phone, revealed the conflicting nature of the relationship in the weeks leading up to the murder. One of the most disturbing texts showed Polette begging Brandon not to leave her and promising that she would do anything to be with him. The prosecution also presented forensic evidence. The knife found at the crime scene had Polette's fingerprints, as well as traces of her DNA. Security cameras from a nearby business caught Polette driving towards Brandon's house on the night of the murder, and phone records showed that her cell phone was in the vicinity of the house during that time. Detective Michael Duval's testimony was one of the key moments of the trial. Duval detailed the brutality of the attack and how the crime scene indicated a personal and unhinged act of violence. This was not a robbery or a planned murder. This was an outburst of rage and jealousy, something deeply emotional, Duval stated. For their part, the defense, led by attorney Charles "Chuck" Lemoyne, tried to shift attention to other possible theories. Lemoyne suggested that Lee Gerard, Polette's daughter and Brandon's girlfriend, might have had motives for the murder. He argued that discovering the infidelity between her mother and boyfriend would have unleashed understandable fury in a betrayed young woman. He also pointed out inconsistencies in Lee's alibi, who had left a slumber party a few hours before the murder. However, this strategy was not enough to convince the jury. Although Lee had admitted to being devastated by the betrayal, there was no physical evidence linking her to the crime. Moreover, her emotional state during interrogations and the trial reflected deep sorrow, not the coldness of a killer. Lee's testimony, though painful, was crucial to the prosecution's case. She described how she discovered the affair by reading text messages on Brandon's phone, and how she confronted both her mother and boyfriend days before the murder. Through tears, Lee said, "I was angry. Yes, I felt betrayed by the two people I loved the most, but I could never hurt Brandon. I loved him more than I can express." After 2 weeks of testimony, including forensic experts, Brandon's friends, and Polette's former business partners, the case came to an end. On November 22, 2021, after only 4 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict. Polette Gerard was found guilty of first-degree murder. On sentencing day, December 1, 2021, Polette was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. During the hearing, she showed little emotion, though she once again denied her guilt. Brandon's family, present in the courtroom, could not hold back their tears as the judge handed down the sentence. For them, although the sentence would not bring Brandon back, it represented a sense of justice. Brandon Thibaut's case left deep scars on Metery. The small community, once proud of its tranquility and unity, was now marked by the horror of such a violent crime. The Gerard house, once the epicenter of a seemingly perfect family, was left desolate. Lee Gerard, after the trial, decided to move away from Metery and start anew in another state, but the trauma of what happened would continue to haunt her. Polette's company, Beauty Vice, quickly collapsed after her arrest. Investigations revealed that it was a pyramid scheme that had led to the ruin of dozens of local women. The closure of the business left many of these women in a precarious financial situation, generating even more resentment towards Polette. On the other hand, Mabel, Brandon's grandmother, was devastated by the loss of her grandson. Neighbors in the community came together to help her in her daily life, but the void Brandon left in her life was impossible to fill. The case of Brandon Thibaut is a chilling reminder of how uncontrolled emotions and dark secrets can destroy lives. Polette Gerard's obsession with Brandon not only led to a brutal murder, but also tore apart an entire family and left a lasting mark on their community. For Detectives Duval and Martinez, who led the investigation, this was one of the most difficult cases of their careers. Although they achieved justice for Brandon, the memory of the crime scene and the emotional complexities of the investigation would stay with them for a long time. If this story moved you, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss more true crime cases like this one. What do you think about Polette Gerard's sentence? Do you think justice was served? Let me know in the comments below. Remember, enjoy life and cherish your loved ones, because you never know what might happen. Until next time.